Ukrainian President Zelensky reaffirmed that direct talks with Russian President Putin remain the most effective path forward as he emphasized Ukraine's continued fight for freedom while its calls for peace are ignored. In a defiant Independence Day address to the nation and looking ahead to the post-war period, Zelensky stated that the presence of foreign troops in Ukraine would be important. Listen to this.
The issue on the ground, the presence, as they say, boots on the ground, is important to us. It is too early to talk about this. First, the infrastructure will be prepared. And of course, the Ukrainian army plays an important role in this infrastructure.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who was also in Kiev for the commemorations, said that Ukraine's security guarantees are not the choice of Russia.
We are working through with our allies in the Coalition of the Willing and with Ukraine the modalities of those security guarantees on land, in the air, and the sea, and I would not exclude the presence of troops.
Amid this, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told NBC News that Putin and US President Trump had discussed the issue of security guarantees for Ukraine and that Putin had raised the issue of the failed Istanbul discussions of 2022. At those discussions in that year, soon after the invasion, Moscow and Kiev discussed Ukraine's permanent neutrality in return for security guarantees from the 5 permanent members of the UNSC. Lavrov said that the countries would be guaranteeing the security, which he underlined must be neutral, non-aligned with any military bloc, and it should be non-nuclear. He made it clear that NATO membership for Ukraine was unacceptable for Russia.
President Putin and President Trump
and the guarantors would be guaranteeing the security of Ukraine, which must be neutral, which must be non-aligned with any military bloc, and which must be non-nuclear.
During negotiations.
Commenting on Ukraine's leadership, Lavrov said the Kremlin views Zelensky as the de facto head of the regime, but not a legitimate leader of Ukraine. And this while adding that the Kremlin will not accept Zelensky's signature on any legal documents establishing terms for an end to the current war. He also accused the Western countries of trying to block peace negotiations to the war after a flurry of diplomatic efforts appeared to stall.
They're just looking for an excuse to block negotiations and want it to be seen not as their fault or Zelensky's, who is also being obstinate, setting conditions and demanding an immediate meeting with Putin at all costs.
Amid this, US Vice President J.D. Vance has come out in support of Russia, saying the country is making significant concessions to Trump for the first time in more than 3 years of conflict.
They've actually been willing to be flexible on some of their core demands. They've talked about what would be necessary to end the war. Of course, they haven't been completely there yet, or the war would be over, but we're engaging in this diplomatic process in good faith.
Vance cited the U.S. administration's belief that Ukraine's security guarantees and territorial issues will be a key factor in reaching a peace deal. His remarks come as tensions remain high on the battlefield. On Sunday, the Kremlin said that Ukraine had attacked Russian power and energy facilities, blaming drone attacks for a fire at a nuclear power plant in its western Kursk region. The Ukraine government's Center for Countering Disinformation said that it had been reported that the shooting down of a drone allegedly caused the fire and blamed Russia for spreading manipulations. There were no injuries and the fire was extinguished quickly. On Sunday, Russia and Ukraine both confirmed a prisoner swap which had taken place, with 146 soldiers on each side being exchanged. Russia's defense ministry also said 8 people from Russia's Kursk region, which was partially occupied by Ukraine for several months, had been handed over and would return home. Zelensky said that those returned by Russia included soldiers, border guards and civilians, most of whom have been in captivity since 2022. He also said that journalist Dmytro Khilyuk, who was kidnapped in the Kiev region at the start of the war, was coming home.